However, every story has two sides, and this one is no different. While some students thought the administration's response was excessively harsh and punitive, some thought it was pretty reasonable.
But when it comes to their decisions that they made, we got to be on campus. We got to get 2 terms on campus. We got to show up in the fall, which I really appreciated as 24s because we'd never been to Dartmouth before, right? Yeah, we have to wear masks, but honestly, like masks are like the least inconveniencing thing in the world, in my opinion. Like they had the tents, they had FOCO, they had lots of opportunities to hang out outside, and now in the winter you can go to people's dorms. I really like that. I'm not on campus right now, but they saw what worked in the fall, and they made our social experience even better. And like we have to remember that there is incredible constraints right now. But like I do feel like Dartmouth, at the end of the day, yes, the way they presented it should have been better, but the results are pretty good. And we didn't have an outbreak, and we are able to spend time together. And so I do hope they learn the lessons of the fall. I think they have, like they're not being as punitive, right? But not like a year long. A year is quite a long time for a punishment, right? And they are letting people go into dorms. They are twice a week testing, which I think is really good, just to be safe. And we get to be there. And they seem to really try to accommodate people's special circumstances, right? People who, most of the people I know who wanted to be on campus for the winter, even though 24s weren't guaranteed a spot, actually were able to get on.
Candidly, and I don't know if this is great for me to admit, I did not revisit the student agreement once. Actually, that's not true. When people at the beginning started getting kicked off campus, I think I reread it one more time, and I didn't really think about it too often after I signed it initially, and I said, these are the guidelines. I have a relatively, keen perspective on what the parameters are, and I just sort of went with it. I said, I'm going to be as careful as possible. I know the rules.
And while social life was incredibly different than what it was before, that doesn't mean 24s had no community.
The thing to consider before we arrived on campus was, I say this a lot when people ask me about it, but especially when you factor in the LGBT factor, is one, LGBT people already, especially in high school, don't have very much of a community. Often, some people are lucky, right? But when I graduated high school, really did not have any other LGBT friends at the time. And so when all of a sudden you join a group chat, you just got into college, right? So you're already in this college mentality. I can't wait for college. I want to meet my friends. But then you get into a group chat and it's like, wow, there are 30 LGBT people right now. That's more than I've ever known in my whole life. That's insane, right? Of course you want to interact. Of course you want to get to know them and make friends, right? But then on top of it, the third factor, not just college, not just LGBT, but COVID, you're already so bored. You're already so isolated. If this is a group that's like, hey, let's have a get to know you Zoom tonight. Let's talk. Yeah, I want to talk. I'm not doing anything at all. And in that way, everyone was bored during the summer. Everyone had access to a button that they could click to talk to other people, and everyone felt isolated. And in the LGBT factor, you want to meet other people who are like you and who've had the same experience. So it's just sort of like a recipe for very intense and prolonged social interaction, right? Yeah. There's no consequence if I stay up until 4 a.m. on Zoom talking all night. There's no consequence because I wake up at noon. My life didn't change at all.
In terms of meeting people, I think certainly I was glad that I knew people going in. So like I said, I had a couple of mutual friends and connections, and also I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and so we have a local alumni group, and so it's relatively small and cohesive, and was able to meet a couple people that way. And then there's also, I have a colleague that went to high school with me that is a student at Dartmouth, and she's a 22. And also meeting some of my teammates and through my clubs and extracurriculars, that was also extremely helpful. So I'm in DIP if that was one extracurricular where I really did forge some meaningful connections, and we were able to work on assignments for the club, and I was able to get close with people. And then also through my courses too. Like, I know we had that group project in Professor Gakondis' class, and a couple of my other classes incorporated some group elements and smaller breakout groups because especially groups that or classes that had more underclassmen, they really tried to incorporate those elements of smaller group projects and discussions. And so I think all of that made it really great to meet a bunch of like-minded, talented Dartmouth students.
So, were the restrictions justified? It's pretty hard to say. On one hand, there were definitely instances of the administration being incredibly unreasonable and dismissing students who probably didn't deserve to get kicked off. On the other, they were being cautious and looking out for their immunocompromised students, as well as our faculty, who skew a little bit older. There's no right answer to this. It's pretty much a matter of philosophical difference. If you believe the campus should be open even at the risk of the immunocompromised or professors, then you probably believe the admin's response was tyrannical. If you believe that the risk is not worth it, you probably think it's fine. Of course, everyone can agree that on the micro level, things could have been better, but the administration responded to criticism from the fall. In the winter, students were allowed in each other's rooms as long as social distancing was followed. So, we're giving the administration a grade of inconclusive. Of the students we interviewed, many of them found the community that made them apply to Dartmouth in the first place. It wasn't terrible, it was just different. But for others, the administration's rules were absurd and excessive, and took a toll on their mental health. There's just no definitive answer here. Ultimately, the administration's response was a mixed bag. On one hand, they prevented cases from rising and generally kept the faculty and student body safe in a time where 500,000 Americans died from this disease. On the other, some of the restrictions were pretty immutably absurd. They should have allowed that one student to test again to ensure that he was positive. They probably should have expanded access to the dorms, and in winter term they did. Overall, though, most people seem to believe that the administration struck a pretty good balance between safety and freedom. Here are the grades they gave.
If this was purely a practical response to stopping COVID on campus, A, but if it was regarding mental health of the students and supportive community, B, maybe C+. Just it was an experience that greatly impacted some people.
For the general response, COVID response from the administration, I'd give a B-. And in isolation, I will give a B.
Honestly, and this might be somewhat unpopular, but I think I would give them a solid B+, 89. Because at the end of the day, I feel like they made the right decisions given the information they had the entire time.
Whatever the equivalent of a B+ is, I would say they're probably right about there, or maybe bordering on an A-. Because I think, in a lot of ways they did what they had to do, and they had a really difficult situation to try to work around, because no one, when you decide to work at a university, you're not I should probably make a plan for how to deal with a global pandemic, because that's not something you expect to happen. And so I can sympathize with the fact that it was a very, it was a year full of tough decisions, and they did what they thought they had to do. But I do think their communication could have been more effective. Because we talked about, there were a lot of inconsistencies, just what was allowed and what was going on when students were coming. If you could take a gap year, and I think that caused a lot of unnecessary stress for students, and I think it cost some students a fair amount of money as far as travel went. And I'm sure the gap year situation is very costly to some people. And so I think that there was a lot of area for improvement in communication in general. And then I guess my main note for the college would be, just don't forget the value of in-person interactions. And I do think I'm not on campus for winter term, but it seems like based on the communication I've been getting via the constant listserv, they are trying to really provide a lot of opportunities for in-person interaction, like with the bonfires and the ice skating rink just being open all the time. And I think that's something they should definitely focus on going forward, because I think that was the main complaint I would have from fall term, which is just, Zoom interaction just isn't the same. Like, you can try to use it as a substitute, but it's just that, it's a substitute.
So overall, we give the Dartmouth administration a B+ for their response to COVID, at least for now. The class of 2024 is unlike any we've ever seen. They went through their senior year of high school through a global pandemic. They missed their graduation, their senior prom, and their beginning of college was marred by circumstances wholly unprecedented. Regardless of when this pandemic is over, be it spring, summer, fall, or God forbid, even later, and whatever happens in the month afterward, we do know one thing: Dartmouth students will adapt and thrive like we've always done. And of course, in true Dartmouth fashion, once this is over, we're gonna party like there's no tomorrow.